Well, hello again. This is Philip Steiger at thebest3d.com with another quick note on some operational details for using PD Howler 9.6 under Steam. And in fact, in this one, I wanted to first show you a couple of ideas, maybe suggestions or recommendations on how to configure something so you can quickly update Howler. And that is, if you're looking at your Steam installation, and that's of course on the program files, x86, right, on your C drive most likely, what you'll see is that you have a ton of folders down there, and one of them being the Steam apps. So in the Steam apps folder, there's a common subfolder, and there is the the list of all the games that you might have. Here I have PD Howler 9.6. I've actually created also a backup directory, just manually created that, and I placed a copy of a file that's called dogwaffle.exe, named it so I remember which one that's from. And the reason is that I'm about to replace a file here with an updated version. Right, so this is the folder where 9.6 is installed, and you can see there's usually a file called dogwaffle.exe. There it is. Right, now this one's already been updated, so the size information you see here is not going to be matching, or the date, April 4, is not going to be matching what you see on your installation from a original Howler 9.6 installation. What I wanted to show you though is that we are developing occasionally some updates, and on occasion we'll make these updates available even just as a new file for you to replace the old one without necessarily a full installer. This is sort of experimental. Sometimes we call them doggybags, sometimes we call them here's a freebie. And really to make it easier for you to quickly remember how to access this folder, you might want to actually create a shortcut to that folder, maybe the common or Steam apps, or even here just Steam, right? So that particular folder, well, let's say you want Steam apps, right? So you take that folder, you go to that folder, you select the file, press and hold the Alt key, and then you can drag that file with the Alt key down. You see create link over here on desktop, right? Let go, and you now have a Steam apps shortcut. I did that a little bit earlier just for the Steam, and you can see where it's pointing. So that's how I can quickly get back to that. I can now also just double click on Steam apps and it opens that folder. So that's something that I would recommend you do if you want to really be familiar with your Dogwaffle installation. As to where it lives, what files are there, and occasionally do some maintenance in there, update some files, add some files, back up some files you may have saved. For instance, here if we go to Dogwaffle PD 9.6, you may look under media, you may have saved some media files, right? These are some of these media files that contain all the brushes and presets for the different paint media. So some of those you may want to back up, right? Foliage, some settings. If you tinker with the foliage and you make some changes, by all means go ahead and save them. Get yourself a backup, because if you uninstall this and then later want to reinstall it, you wonder where's all my foliage. It might still be in there, but it might also have been deleted. So same thing with clouds. If you create some very unique clouds with the particle modeler, there are brush sets. So these are some small image collections, BMP files that contains the internal brush images, and then there's of course a lot of files here, and some of them are scripts for Lua. Actually, I don't know if you have them in a separate subfolder, but the whole idea is that you really should kind of become familiar with what Project Dogwaffle looks like as far as like the installation folder. Right, so make it easy on yourself. Make it possible to quickly just double-click a shortcut on your desktop. And so what I'm going to do now actually is look at a different folder here. It's called Dogwaffle Plus, or PD 9.6 Plus. This is sort of my beta folder where I have new files every once in a while, as they are being built by Dan Ritchie, our developer. And what we have is here an updated version that I want to now install on my Steam apps. So I'm going to go over here, common, Howler 9.6. All right, and so that's what you could do if you wanted to put that doggy bag right there. So I'm taking this file, Control C for copy, click here. Now I know I'm about to replace this file. So I'm going to go Control. Oops, I got some Tango. Why is Tango bugging me here? Refuse this. I think I need to uninstall that app. There you go. Control that. Control V to replace or to paste it in, and I'm going to replace this file. So this is now replacing a file. Oh, and I can't because I'm currently running Howler. So I'm glad actually I ran into that. So let's go and open Howler. Yep, I do have something here still running. Let's go and clear this experiment, exit out of it, give it a few seconds, and then try again. No, still not ready. It takes a while for the program to really get out of memory, and sometimes there's something else. So at times what you might want to do is go to the task manager and clear, let's see, processes. Yeah, there is no more. Oh, there is another dog waffle here. All right, let's go clear that. Okay, so now we should be fine. There you go. All right. Yeah, as long as the program is running, you can't replace the file. But now we've done that, and so we can double click that to run it, and of course that's going to give us the familiar error, that error unknown, unless it's the same version that I just had before. But you might need to run this as administrator, right click it and run it as administrator. All right, so when things change, you might occasionally see an update in about Howler. It's still 9.6 here, so we didn't refresh that information. What this update was about is the OBJ file. Right? So I want to show you the difference in the OBJ file export. I'm going to do that on a very small example. Let's say, let's make it 200 by 200. There, 200. Uncheck the constraint, 200. So that's 200 by 200 pixels, very small image. I'm going to go and put just a noise here, render plasma noise. So we have a little bit of a mountain elevation map there. Looks like a little bit like a mountain. Yeah, and I'm going to go and enter let's move this over a little bit with the control and the shift key, or just like here, press and drag the hand, and then that will allow you to move it. And now I'm going to go to the 3D designer and open a little bit more here, do some erosion, add some sediments, add some textures, bring the snow level down. Just the usual for tinkering with the elevation map and turn that into a 3D terrain. The color, if I was going to do the final render here, I might want to set the color, but I'm not. I'm going to go and actually put the final render, export this, right? I want to export and compare with and without. So we currently are developing a version of the export for the OBJ file. You see here a couple of things you can store. You can store the erosion map. That's there. You can store the depth map. That's basically the elevation map modified by erosion and sediments as well. So that might be of value. And then there is also the texture, right, which results from these snow, rock, and grass zones. So I can store that as well, because that one is actually definitely one that I might want to save later on and make available with my wavefront OBJ file. But now let's talk about saving the OBJ, right? So that will export this elevation map into as a this terrain as a 3D OBJ file. Click that, and now this new version under development has an additional option here. Right, now we can actually also save the UV texture coordinates. Right. In the past, it didn't do that. In fact, it was as if you had unchecked that, and the only thing you would save is the position of the vertices in 3D space and then a mesh or a list of polygons built from those vertices. And so you could still use a texture, but you'd have to remap it. You'd have to use a planar projection to map it, or as a vertical projection down onto that mesh. Here, what we now have is baking the UV position right into it. Takes a little bit more space on the file that you export, but it makes it a little bit easier to use. Now we still don't save the material file that identifies this image or the file of a saved copy of this image as the texture to actually map onto it. But that's okay, because many times you may not even use this. You may want to modify this first and do some other painting on it before you save it and use it. So we think that's certainly a great step. The next step, to totally automate everything, might not be the right thing for you anyway. So so far we do this. We might do a few other things, but I think this is definitely a great way to have it more easily mapped, regardless of which 3D program you use afterwards, or if you have a game engine where you use this. Most likely you'll be looking to have that UV address mapped onto it. So that's what we give you here. So I wanted to just export both cases, right? The default one is with the UV. Let's go save that. And I'm going to go and save this in a folder called OBJ files. I'm going to go, this is T2, or terrain 2, right? And now this one was, let's see, did I have it clicked? I think I had it clicked with the OBJ, right, with the UV. So the default is with UV dot OBJ. Right, I don't need the comma here really. With UV OBJ. All right, so I'm saving that with UV, and then I'm going to do again the same. And this, by the way, saves pretty quickly right now because it's a fairly small image, right? A small mesh that is built from that. I started with 200 by 200. This is not a huge file. Be prepared to wait a little bit longer if you build, if you have an image that's 1K by 1K or 2000 by 2000. That's going to take a long time to save. It's going to be a big file. It's not compressed. It's not binary. It's an ASCII file. Now we make it fairly small at that. We don't force the decimal values behind the decimal points. If they are all zeros, we leave them out. So that's going to save you a little bit space too. But we'll have a look at that. Let me save this again, now this time with the UV off. Alright, so the first one, terrain 2, we did with UV. Now I'm going to do without UV. There you go. And now I need to go into that folder, and since I don't have that folder open, I'm just going to pretend I'm going to go save again and save. But this time I'm going to use this dialog to go well, you just right click here and open this. Right, let's focus on that, and then right click this one as well and open that. And then another thing we can do is change the display mode here to details so you can see the size more easily. And you see here terrain 2 with UV and terrain 2 without UV, and you can tell there's a difference in the size. Alright, so that's indication that without UV it's going to be a smaller file size, but you're missing something. Right? That's the UV mapping, the baking of the texture address, of the UV mapping address onto each vertex. So now let's have a look at what that actually looks like here. If we open the one without UV and the one with UV. So here's one with UV. Here's terrain 2 without UV. At the beginning, the two files look identical. Right, because at the beginning we first export a list of the vertices found throughout that entire terrain. Right, so here's a list that has a X, Y, and Z value, and you notice that some of these appear as integers. So essentially, we let the system, we let our exporter save it with the decimal values if there are decimal values to save. If the value has a decimal, a fractional part. We certainly don't want to lose that, right? But if it's something like this one here, rather than saving it out as 100 with a bunch of zeros, we just keep it as 100. That makes the file a little bit smaller, right? And that may help. It may be totally accidental, but I think we'll take the credit for it nonetheless. All right, so the other thing is once you have the list of vertices, that's what you see here in the OBJ file, is that first it gives you a list of all the vertices found that we might ever need to build something from. So here's a list of all the vertices, and then we start building something from it, right? And what we start building is starting right here. Hold on. Coming up a second here. So there it is. We essentially then build at the end of the vertices. Here's the list of the last vertex. And then we start building the facets. So here's a list of facets. A facet is essentially a triangle or more, right? We need at least 3 points. Here's point number 1, point number 201, point number 202. And whatever these points are, that's what we initially listed here. The first point, and then somewhere around there, the second point, and so on. So this is just the format of a list of triangles. It covers that entire terrain mesh. And so first we have a list of vertices, then we have a list of facets built from those vertices. That's how simple that format is. A wavefront OBJ can have very simple and very complex data structures. What we have in this case here is just the vertices, and I mean just the vertex positions, right? We have nothing else. Now here is the case with the UV. So it starts the same way, but as we saw, the file size is bigger, and then so somewhere around here we reach the last vertex that needs to be defined, and as soon as we have that, just around here, there, now we reach the end, again the last vertex in the list of vertices, and now we have also started to export vertex textures, right? VT stands for vertex texture, and that one only has 2 values. That's the UV, 2 values, but again floating point values, and eventually we'll reach the bottom of them. And you might argue maybe we need a little bit more precision or fractional portions, but no, that depends on how many vertices there are, right? So, but once we have all of these vertex textures, we can start building something from them together with the vertex positions. So that's the UV baking information for each of the vertices, and then eventually we start building the facets just like we did in the earlier case, and there we go. So here is the list, the end of the list of vertex textures. Now by here we now have a list of vertices, which is the XYZ position information on those, and then the vertex textures. Now it's time to build the facets. So here's the first facet, built from the first position, and the second point is number 201, and the third point is number 202. Then we have another facet going from point number 2 to point number 1 and to point number 202. So you see how this is building facets, a list of triangles in this case, where we have the vertex position and also the vertex texture address, or the baking information right in there, the positioning of that texture. So that's essentially what this new format is. It's a little bit bigger because it has more information, right? So and that works, and so with that you can now take it into your favorite 3D program, Carrara, Lightwave, Blender, whatever your 3D program is. Take that texture information, take the terrain information as a mesh, and then also one thing you need to do is to take this stored texture and export that, right? So you click it, so that loads it as the current image, and then you can go and save it right here, right? Save it as a PNG, JPEG, if you're not afraid of the lossy aspect of JPEG. I would recommend TIFF or PNG actually, really. And then that way you have a file that is universally recognized, and you can also work with as a texture in most programs, and map, apply that on the mesh that you have in the OBJ file. All right, well, I hope that helps understand how to work with this. We're probably going to make that update available pretty soon, and so that the update on Dog Waffle available pretty soon. And so I would think that it should be really useful to know where to place that, and I thought that's why I would do that quick tutorial. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.